Welcome everyone. There's going to be a bunch of you jumping on to watch this video, and then we have some awesome people live too. And so I want to start out, even before we introduce ourselves, by just asking you to type in, if you can, um, do you have you been diagnosed with a thyroid issue, or do you suspect that you have one? Because it'll help us kind of gauge who we're talking to and how we can best be of help to you today. So when you get a moment, write that in, and we'll get started. So I am Molly. Hi everyone. I'm a life coach, and so normally I deal with helping people release their stress and getting reconnected with I call it their sacred self, or that awesome person within that kind of gets bombarded and sidetracked with life's busyness. I use a lot of traditional coaching techniques, but I also use some energy psychology techniques and like meditation and EFT. Okay, so one person just wrote that they have not been diagnosed, but have an appointment with a naturopath first. That's awesome. Okay, yay. Right. And so I also, the reason I am even speaking about this is because I went through a lot of health stuff. And in the course of going through that, I realized that these issues are not straightforward. There's a lot of information missing, and all doctors have different levels of training. So for over a year, I was being told that I was like the specimen of health, and if they could have more people like me, it would be amazing. They'd be so happy. And I knew inside something was wrong with my body. And I'm also intuitive, and I did energy healing for a long time. So I was at a conference one time, and I was talking to some of the girls there and saying, like, something's wrong with me. And so they're asking what the symptoms were, and all these intuitives are going, we keep hearing thyroid, we keep hearing thyroid. So I went to my acupuncturist, who I had been working with for a long time, and I was like, will you please run a blood test, because my doctor's telling me everything's fine, and I know something's wrong with me. And so sure enough, she did, and it came back that there was a thyroid issue. But then it took another full year for me to really find the right help and ask the right questions and get the right tests done that indicated not only did I have hypothyroidism, but I had Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune disease. And I didn't know that information. When you have that information, you can make better choices and different decisions to begin the healing process. So it was a long journey for me, and I want to share as much as I possibly can about this so that other people out there are not struggling like I did. And in the course of healing my stuff, I started working with Jen, who I will hand it over to in a moment. And Jen helped me on my journey get some answers and do some coaching with my situation. And I noticed the reason I started speaking about this through my business was because I noticed that there was what I perceived to be a big gap in helping people heal from these things. So I would read a book or talk to my doctor, and there'd be like a paragraph about, oh, reduce stress and make sure you don't eat anything you like, don't drink anything, and you know, do meditation. And I'm like, okay, I know all this stuff because of my training and background, so that's easy for me. But for people who are going through this and they're not used to meditating and they're not used to some of the stress releasing techniques, that's a heavy lift when you have brain fog and you have no energy. And the other thing is, if it were easy to just follow, you know, what the doctor says, and like, don't eat chocolate and don't drink wine and don't have cheese, then I think there probably wouldn't be disease in this country, and we'd all be, you know, thinner and healthier and everything else. So it's not just a matter of doing it, it's like how to do it, and how do you do that and still feel like a human when you're out to dinner with people and they're indulging in all this stuff that you can't have. It's an interesting situation to be in. And so a lot of the stuff that I started helping clients with who are going through these similar issues is related to that, of like how to hang on to yourself and still have a life and be healing these things that are going on in your body that a lot of people in your life don't understand, because they're kind of like, they're newer diseases. They've kind of developed and escalated as our technology has. As you know, we became addicted to our iPhones, our disease changed. So of course that makes sense. And now I'll hand it over to Jen Lecca.
Hey everybody, so I'm Jen, and I'm a functional diagnostic health coach, which is a mouthful. So essentially, what I help people do is, like Molly said, she came to me to, with some of the concerns about her health, and I help people feel stuck, take a deep dive look at what's going on with them. So we're going to talk a little bit about tonight about some of the frustrations that Molly's gone through specifically and trying to like get to the bottom of her health issues and get a diagnosis that was accurate for her. And I see so many clients that are like this. So part of my mission is to, one, give people access to the tools and information about kind of like holistic and functional medicine practices that aren't out there in the traditional medical system. Also to be an advocate for them or to be a supporter to help them find a health professional that is going to be supportive and taking a deeper look with us in what's going on with their health too. So that you can actually like find all the missing pieces. So like Molly was describing earlier, she's getting all these bits and pieces of information, and it's like this big huge puzzle to your health, and sometimes it's hard to put it all together. And if you go to a regular PCP, they're usually trained in just one area or one generalization, and they're not looking at the connectedness of the body essentially sometimes. So I help you like look at the big picture and see where, like if it's your thyroid or if it's your adrenals and some of the stuff we're going to talk about tonight, like how all of that is interconnected, and then you can like heal the whole body naturally essentially. So I use holistic and functional health practices with my clients, and some of the stuff that Molly's talked about. So like, probably have a general idea of like what healthy eating is. And one of my kind of mottos is that there's a difference between eating healthy and eating right for your body. Like eating right for your body is going to include healthy foods, but not every healthy food is right for your body. So I help you find out like exactly what foods are right for your body, for your makeup specifically, that's going to help to nourish it in the ways that it needs so that you can restore balance to your thyroid and adrenals and all of those other things. And like Molly, I also incorporate kind of like transformational coaching applications or methodologies. So like helping people with the mindset shift, and Molly does that deeper work, and this is where our services and how we work with clients like pairs really well together, because she's an expert in the life coaching side of things, so I'll touch on that a little bit, and oftentimes I refer clients to her to do some of that deeper mental, emotional, mind shift work to support them in that area, because it is such a huge piece of this. And like Molly too, I have my own kind of health story, so I haven't been diagnosed with a thyroid specific condition, but I have had a slew of hormonal imbalances, including adrenal fatigue, and I was a specimen of health also. Came into this industry as a personal trainer. I was calorie counting, working out every day, but feeling like completely exhausted all the time, especially in the afternoons. Like I was literally like dragging through the afternoon, taking down like a double Americano from Starbucks with milk or soy milk in it, and not understanding why that wasn't working for me, and just feeling like really unmotivated. And then I had health issues that started popping up, like skin cancer when I was 24, amenorrhea or not getting my period for over 5 years, some issues with like lumps or weird stuff going on in my breast, and from the work that I've done, I've been able to restore balance to my body, and I've literally gone to doctors and they have told me, well, I've never seen that before, I don't know what that is. So I've been on the search as well, and luckily Molly and I have both found naturopaths who support us in our health goals and actually promote us being in control of our health and understanding what's going on with us, and that's what I want to help people do too. Is similar, that you guys have a similar story. Like that's what we're here to do, support you in your healing journey overall. And we're so excited to be working together and giving you this information tonight.
Yes, indeed. I have been quiet about my whole journey until now, and I am going to try to control myself on tonight's call because there's so much to say in so little time. So let's just go through quickly what we're going to cover tonight. We're going to talk about hypothyroidism. What is it? What are the symptoms, as well as Hashimoto's? What is the diagnosis process? That is such a critical piece of information that I want to make sure everyone here knows about. What is the root cause of it? And then my whole thing is, a lot of this has to be naturally healed. There's not a magic pill to take, but I am all about naturally healing the body as much as possible. So I'm going to go through some mindset changes, and Jen's going to talk about some dietary changes that you can make go through an upcoming webinar, and then you'll want to stick around till the end because there is a free meditation I'm going to give away. I'm going to give away the link to that, which will help you connect with your thyroid, which might sound totally out there for some of you. And I'll get into that a little bit more, why it's so important to have tools like that. So Jen, take it away.
Yeah, so the most common condition, thyroid condition that I probably see in my practice, and I would say it's the most common amongst anybody who's diagnosed with a thyroid condition, is hypothyroidism. So hypothyroidism is basically, there's two kinds. There's also hyper, which we're going to focus more on hypo today. So hypo means that basically you have an underactive thyroid gland, and that can be for a variety of reasons. It just means that the thyroid gland isn't making enough of thyroid hormone, and there's a couple of different thyroid hormones that we'll touch on when we talk about testing tonight. And with hypothyroidism, a lot of the reasons why this goes misdiagnosed or overlooked by doctors is because you take a look at some of the symptoms here. These symptoms could be related to so many other things, and a lot of times doctors will chase symptoms specifically versus like looking at the scope of it. So for hypothyroidism, some of the most common symptoms that I see people with is fatigue, first and foremost, always. Constantly feeling cold all the time. So that's like, I was never diagnosed with a hypothyroidism, but my thyroid was definitely off as a result of adrenal fatigue. And I used to have like cold hands and feet, or always just be cold all the time. And I used to be a fitness competitor where I was training for fitness shows and bikini competitions. And I used to always just joke and say that it was because I was so lean. I didn't have any fat to keep me warm. But once I like healed my hormones, I don't experience that anymore. So weight gain is another one. Swelling can go along with this. Any kind of weakness, like muscle weakness, joint weakness, just feeling overall weak in your body. High cholesterol. Dry skin is a super common one, also with dry eyes. And if you're missing the outer third of your eyebrow, so ladies, that's like a tall tale sign. I cannot look at a person in the face and not look at their eyebrows. Like, I'm always evaluating what's happening with somebody. But issues with memory, depression, menstrual irregularities, infertility, slow heart rate, and it's because the body is a dynamic system. So if your thyroid is off, it's like a domino effect or a cascading effect on all the other hormones as well that regulate some of these other things for you. So you can have a slew of these issues, and like menstrual irregularities, I think, is a perfect example. You go to your doctor, you say, I have menstrual irregularities, and they're going to test like your estrogen and your progesterone most likely, or they're just going to slap you with a prescription for birth control pill to regulate that for you. They probably wouldn't even take a first look at thyroid specifically. High cholesterol, same thing. They're going to tell you to eat better, cut out fat from your diet, which is like the reverse of what you actually want to do if you have a thyroid issue. We'll talk about that with diet stuff. And they'll give you like a prescription for cholesterol medication. Same thing with dry skin and dry eyes. Like I have clients that are on medications, like they've been diagnosed with eczema or dry skin, and once we resolve their thyroid issues, they don't have that stuff anymore. They're on a medication or eye drops for dry eye type of stuff. So hair loss can be another one that I see a lot. So you can see how the confusion can come in for you guys and just a regular PCP that you're going to. Again, like, have to think of your PCP as somebody who is like has general knowledge. They're not an expert in any area. So if you're suspecting that you have a thyroid issue, then and you have some of these symptoms, you definitely want to be seeing a thyroid expert for sure.
Perfect. Thanks, Jen. And I'll jump in and talk a little bit about Hashimoto's, because this is what I really wish I knew, because the blood panel I originally took didn't include all the markers, which Jen's going to go over in a moment. But Hashimoto's is an autoimmune disease, and it's obviously Hashimoto's is related to the thyroid. In this case, there's hundreds of autoimmune conditions, but basically it's the body attacking itself, and in this case it's the body attacking the thyroid. And since the thyroid can't produce enough hormones for the body, we have all these crazy symptoms, which are basically the symptoms of hypothyroidism. But what I didn't know, like, this is stuff I wish was more prevalent, or maybe people tried to tell me and it just didn't land for whatever reason, but the majority of people, it's like 90% or something, I think, Jen, who have hypothyroidism, it stems from Hashimoto's, and 7 out of the 8 people who have it are women. So it's very prevalent among women, and majority of my clients are women. So anyway, and the symptoms are no joke. I mean, they got difficult for me. Like, I was in bed for months, and I had no idea what was going on. And you know, I don't regret much in life, but I do wish I had that additional testing done earlier, because I think I could have been doing interventions at an earlier stage and not lost so much of myself and my life in that process. You know, everything happens as it is supposed to, but for anyone out there listening, I definitely want you to remember this slide that Jen's going to go over in terms of the diagnosis process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one thing I'll add to the Hashimoto's and the autoimmune part too, you guys, is that an autoimmune disease is something that you would have a genetic disposition to. Mm-hmm. So if there is autoimmune disease that runs in your family, any kind of autoimmune disease, like any celiacs, Graves' disease, other Hashimoto's, other type of autoimmune issues, that could set you up for Hashimoto's. So there are tests that you can do specifically also to look at your predispositions for autoimmune disease. And Molly and I are going to be talking about leaky gut like later on in a couple of webinars.
Yeah.
Leaky gut also predisposes you to triggering an autoimmune issue. But for now, the diagnostic process to look at these things, and I'll explain also like how autoimmune, like Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism, are kind of overlooked sometimes. So when you're investigating your thyroid, you want to run what's called like a full thyroid panel or a comprehensive panel that includes all of these markers that we have listed here on the screen. So TSH is thyroid stimulating hormone. There's cofactors into that are called T4 and T3. There's even free T4 and free T3. There's reverse T3. There's anti-thyroglobulin, and then there's anti-thyroid peroxidase antibody. And typically, when you go to your doctor, what they would run is just the TSH, and which is your total, basically thyroid stimulating hormone. But that can be misleading, because your TSH can actually look perfectly fine, and some of these other markers can be completely out of whack. So, for example, the antibody marker, the thyroid antibody, is specific for Hashimoto's. You definitely want your antibodies to be under 200. I've worked with Hashimoto's clients where that antibody marker is 1,300. And so we work to balance their body to get it closer to the 200 range so they can manage their autoimmune disorder. Once you have an autoimmune disease, you always had it, but you can certainly manage it better with certain lifestyle factors. Also, looking at T4 and T3, because that's part of Hashimoto's as well as the hypothyroidism. So those should be in perfect ratio together. There's essentially like every hormone in your body kind of has like a partner hormone. So for example, most ladies on the call might be familiar with their estrogen and progesterone as their menstrual cycle. And estrogen and progesterone, through your cycle, they do this perfect dance together, keeping each other in balance. Well, that's exactly what T4 and T3 do. So if you have hypothyroidism or Hashimoto's, then usually one of those is out of sync also. So a lot of people who have Hashimoto's are maybe on certain types of either natural or prescription medications to balance either one of those out. So you can see how looking at just TSH, like you can have a perfect TSH marker, but then you have all of these other markers that could be off. And also some additional tests, like if you want to get a bigger picture, because when I look at this and I say, okay, the thyroid is off, like T4 and T3 are out of whack, and antibodies are off, like I mentioned earlier, the body is this dynamic, complex system. So some other tests that would give you like good insights for what's happening, like why this is occurring or how can you manage it better, would be something that looks at liver function, because your liver converts 60% of your thyroid hormones. So if your liver is sluggish, it's clogged, then it's not able to convert thyroid hormone as well as it could. So if you focus on also cleaning up your liver and balancing your liver, that can help to support your thyroid production or conversion. And then also looking at an adrenal cortisol panel, because this impacts thyroid. specifically, you have an axis. It's called the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. And so the hypothalamus gland, the pituitary gland, and the adrenal gland, they all work together, and they are kind of the main control centers for your thyroid. So your hypothalamus and your pituitary communicate with your thyroid. So if you have a dysfunction or dysregulation in the HPA axis because your cortisol is off, which cortisol can be off from stress in our life. I've never run a cortisol panel and haven't seen somebody with some degree of adrenal fatigue or cortisol dysregulation. That can also impact thyroid. So you, like Molly was talking about, the different interventions that we can do, it would be a combination of all those things. So it's not just specifically focusing on thyroid. We do want to support the thyroid, but what are the other organs or glands in the body to support also to help boost your thyroid production and function as well?
Perfect. Yeah, and I'm glad you said something about the genetic thing too, Jen, because I didn't realize that there was autoimmune that runs on one side of my family, and so that was a precursor for me having this, and I didn't know those questions to ask, with my family. And there's a book I love called The Paleo Approach: Reverse Autoimmune Disease and Heal Your Body. If you do want to research this more, the woman Sarah who writes that book does an amazing job of outlining all this, because once you have an autoimmune disease, you will always have it. So it's not, you'll go into remission with it when you take care of it. So it's not like you're going to have symptoms the rest of your life, but it's something that I will be managing the rest of my life to make sure that I'm in remission. And things happen, stress happens. It's like Jen described it as being a puzzle, and that is our body. Each day it's different. And so it's what I teach, and I'm going to talk about, is really getting to know your body, because I can tell you something and Jen can tell you something and your naturopath can tell you something and your PCP can tell you something, but ultimately the best guide in this situation is your own body. But most of us are so disconnected, even if we think we're not. We're so disconnected from what is really going on inside of our body, because the first thing we do when we check in with our body is we start feeling emotions, and we're all so scared of those that we don't want to do that, so we avoid it, we shut it down, we watch TV, or we do whatever else. So
yeah, and one thing I'll add to that too, Molly, real quick, about the autoimmune is that autoimmune disease or autoimmune disorders can pop up later in life. So you can carry around the gene for a long time, and it will never be activated until the right circumstance happens. So this would be like that point in your life where all of a sudden you wake up one day and you realize that you don't feel like yourself, which is kind of what happened with Molly, right?
Yeah.
And that's because you can have that gene, you can carry that gene for a long time. So they say that there's 3 things that have to be in place in order for an autoimmune disorder to be activated. And one is that you have to carry the gene. The second one is you have leaky gut. And then the third one is some type of environmental trigger. So an environmental trigger could be gluten. Like eating gluten is an environmental trigger for autoimmune disorders. Also, certain parasites or bacteria or yeast in your gut are also can also be triggers for an autoimmune disorder. So if you have those 3 things in alignment together at some point in your life, in your 20s, in your 30s, or even in your 40s or later on, that's when all of a sudden the disorder will activate, and you'll have that change. You're going through life feeling totally fine, and then one day it's like you totally hit a wall and everything feels different.
Yep. Totally. Yeah, that's what happened. Literally, I ran into a wall and couldn't move. So, of course, having my training and background, in Reiki and life coaching and being certified in emotional intelligence, and my master's degree is in psychology, I wanted to know what really caused this, what was really going on in my system, because I definitely believe that whatever's happened physically is a result of some emotional or some kind of stress in our life, and it's not just a straight up physical thing. So I started by talking myself through, okay, well, the thyroid is located in our throat chakra, which is one of our energy centers, and so this represents our ability to communicate and to express ourselves. So it could be expressing ourselves in terms of our calling in life. So whether we wanted to be a mom, or we wanted to develop websites, or whatever it is, have we been able to do that? Or, does our family think we should have been something different, and we turned out different? So the other thing is I wanted to know, how did my thyroid learn to become un, inactive, underactive, whatever you want to call it? And when I started thinking about the emotional patterns related to that, is there's an underlying pattern of not feeling like you're heard in life. And so maybe it also not being safe for you to express yourself. So maybe you grew up in a situation where your opinion didn't matter, or it wasn't safe to express your opinion. Maybe who you are isn't accepted in your environment, or it wasn't accepted in your environment. And I do, when I'm working one-on-one with clients, I do go back to like what was going on in your childhood, not to place blame, but to understand that we develop a lot of behavioral and emotional patterns in our childhood that we then subconsciously carry into adulthood. So when I started looking at it, like, where did I learn to attack myself? I probably learned that at a very young age, because how I grew up was a little bit, I was different than kind of how like my dad would handle things. And so I learned to just kind of like be quiet about my opinion on certain things because I knew it would be rejected. And that was my way of handling it. So my sister handled it a totally different way. So it's not like my parents did something to me where, to cause this. It was my reaction to situations. That was how I survived my situation. And so for a lot of women too, they don't speak their minds as much, or they'll just kind of take it on for the team or for their family or whatever. So if you do have a thyroid thing going on, a good starting place is just to ask yourself, like, where am I not being myself? Where am I not expressing who I am? Either literally, like through words, or expressing, I wanted to be a hairstylist, but my parents thought that was wrong, and I'm an attorney, and I totally hate it, and I feel suffocated every day, just making up examples. But it's kind of interesting as you start reflecting to just see where that pattern might have developed in your life. And like, where did my body learn to attack itself? That's when I really started reflecting. And honestly, one of the reasons I started reflecting is because I was doing all the right things. Like, I was doing everything the experts were telling me. So I was like taking the supplements, I had gotten the right tests, and I was like eating what I was supposed to eat, and like my body would not budge. It was just not healing. And I realized, because so much of my behavioral patterns had caused this, like my body learned to attack itself from my mind. Our bodies absorb everything for us. They absorb emotions that we don't process. They absorb stress. And so kind of unknowingly, I was never good enough unless I was like perfect. I had this whole perfectionism thing going on. So, perfect is never going to happen. So I'm constantly like criticizing myself. I was criticizing my appearance, like my body, because it wasn't perfect. So I realized that my mind was very much attacking myself. And so, of course, my body is going to follow and take suit there, right? Oh, it's totally safe to attack. Because whatever's going on in our body, there's an emotional component, there's a mental component, it's all connected. And then from lifestyle, like, because I felt like I needed to prove myself in anything I did, it was like my lifestyle was overwhelming. And jam-packed, from day to night. I mean, when I think back of everything I was doing at once, it makes my head spin, and it was not healthy for my body. And Jen and I are going to talk about adrenals at a different time, but I also realized I was creating a lot of subtle stress in my life. And so even though there were some big stressful moments, there were daily subtle stressors throughout my day. And that's what I work on, especially with the people with the adrenals, but also with the Hashimoto's, because you feel like you're under attack constantly when you're dealing with subtle struggles. And I'll give you a couple of examples. Like, so for a person who always leaves their gas tank empty, they forget about it. Every time they're getting in their car, they're like, oh my God, now I'm running late, and blah, 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 blah. Or your closet's a mess. So the simple act of getting clothes out in the morning to get ready is a stressor. And one thing I realized was like really silly, but just breaking it down to like everyday terms. I love makeup. I have this big makeup drawer, but I didn't have like the stuff I use daily separated out. So every morning was like a war trying to find what I wanted to put on my face. And so these little things, as you think of them, start to add up, like going down to your fridge and not having food, and then not being able to eat before your call. We do this stuff to ourselves all the time. And when we're not conscious of these things, and we don't make changes to them, they build over time, because even those silly little, like, kind of stressful things are eating away at our cortisol, and stress hormones are being released. So that's a lot of what I talk about with people.
I love those examples. Like I've had
Yeah.
similar examples. Like I'll never forget talking with a client, and she was like, I feel like, she's like, well, before bed, I can't get to bed on time to like get the quality sleep that I need, because she's like, I'm like, well, what are you doing before bed? And she was saying how she tidies up the house, and I was like, why are you tidying up the house? Like, who's going to come over in the middle of the night and see your house? And it's just an expectation that she was setting for herself that was creating stress and making her feel like she couldn't get to bed on time. And when I put it in those terms, she was like, well,
Yeah.
I guess you're right. Like,
Yeah.
who cares? You know, who cares about that kind of stuff? And
Yeah.
I just want to also mention here, you know, in the beginning we talked about what are all the things that trigger your thyroid to be suppressed in these kind of ways, but it also can work in the reverse. So as Molly's talking about, you know, how did her body learn to attack itself and suppressing like your throat chakra and your energy and your voice, it can also be a reverse. So that could be the starting point. Can we ever truly know where the starting point is? No, not exactly, but we can just see the overall dysfunction that's happening. So yours may have started, or anybody on the line may have started from that suppression of your voice from a long time ago, not being heard, not expressing yourself in the ways that you needed most. So that suppression of your thyroid then had the reverse domino effect on your adrenals and your gut health and all these other things, because again, it's a dynamic system, so everything in there is interconnected. And one of my mentors, Dr. Kalish, he talks about this a lot because he's also a trained Reiki master, and one of the functional things he's spoken about a lot is the third chakra, looking at that throat chakra and talking about like if you have to work on the energetic principles of it as well as like the physiology of it too.
Yeah, I mean, considering especially so many people have, if it's you have a thyroid issue, usually you have adrenal and leaky gut. Not everyone, but a lot of people do, and those are three different energy centers that felt attacked at some point, you know, through our behavior or through our environment, and so it's definitely all connected, as Jen said. And really, there was a huge process for me to go through of acceptance and forgiveness, because it's not easy. If you do want to heal, you really do have to go through this of understanding these patterns that you've maybe created unintentionally. And when you do, it's like accepting that you had a role in it without beating yourself up and forgiving yourself for it. You know, it's like we're all doing the best we can, including our body. Our body's doing the best it can, given what it's dealing with. And so I started doing a lot of meditations to connect with my thyroid, and I went to a woman to help me do that, because I can help other people, but it's harder to do it on yourself, you know. And when I started listening to my body, it had a whole lot to say. Like, it had a lot to say. And I would be able to use that, because when you go through a journey like this, there's like endless supplements are going to be put on and stuff like that. And it's like, not all of them are going to work exactly right for you. And so tuning into your body to that level is a very big gift. And you also get much more connected to your energy levels and what feels good to you, and not making a decision because you feel like you have to, but coming from a place of being connected with your body, your mind, and your spirit. And then this is like the critical thing. We were talking about this on a different webinar last night with Jen, and I was like, even if you like disregard everything else that I've said, at least tonight, like, remember, you have to rebuild trust with your body. Your body doesn't trust you right now on some level, because there's a broken relationship. And so learning to listen to the voice of your body, and then learning to release the blocks through your subconscious mind, through tapping, or through tapping's EFT, emotional freedom technique. It's an energy psychology thing, or meditation. You have to get those practices going. There's a disconnect right now between you and your body, and that's what you want to start rebuilding, so you can start rebuilding your health. And basically, there were three areas that I have approached it from, you know, for myself and then with clients, is the mind. We constantly are criticizing ourselves. And if you're not aware of that, you'll become aware of it in this practice. But it's a matter of noticing when you're criticizing yourself over something, stopping it, dropping it, and replacing it. So that's an ongoing thing every day for the rest of your life. That's consciousness, that's awareness, that's what like Eckhart Tolle has written about. There's a ton of books out there on it, but resetting that mindset has to happen in order to begin to heal. Consciously stopping the cycle of mental stress. So a couple weeks ago, a client was over my place, and I opened the closet in my office, and she's like, you have the most your amazing closets, they're so clean. And I was like, oh my God, that's the best compliment you could ever give me, because before they were a mess and they caused me stress, and this means I'm not stressing myself out. So noticing what those subtle stressors are and clearing some of them off your plate so your body's not dealing with that. And then depositing positive affirmations throughout the day. So we have to do this. That's why I run my prosperity parties. Like, our minds are inherently wired negatively, and it's to protect us. It's not a bad thing. So when you notice the thoughts coming up, it's like, my mind's just trying to protect me on some level. Thanks, but no thanks. Switching it. And there's some techniques that you can use to eliminate some of that from a subconscious level, which is the tapping, meditation, and there's a couple other things. But also, naturally healing includes starting to pay attention to your energy level. So I got really clear that like an 8-hour workday really isn't my thing anymore. I'm better in like 2-hour spurts, and sometimes that means that I'm going to work for a couple hours on a Saturday, and sometimes I won't. But forcing myself through a 4-hour or an 8-hour thing doesn't work. I can do 4 hours, but I need to take like a 10-minute energy break in between where I'm having a snack or doing a breathing exercise or a meditation to just kind of recenter myself. And not forcing workouts. That was a huge thing that was hard. You know, John and I talked about it a lot, but I was told by my doctor, do not work out because it's stressing your body out. It's bad for you. And I had been an athlete my whole life. I was the nerd that went to the gym every morning before work. Like, my employees would make fun of me, but I loved it. And so that was a hard thing to think that, you know, what's better for my body is tuning into it to see what its energy level is before I push it. And we're in such a culture where there's such intense workouts now that we think that that's the right thing to do. And the right thing to do is check in with your body to see what works. I don't know if I'll ever be a runner again now. I go walking for an hour a day, which I thought was like so lame when I started this whole journey, like walking. Oh my gosh. And now I miss my walk if I don't take it daily, and I've been able to shift there. So it's, again, noticing what the mindsets are, like the judgments that you have around exercising, around taking breaks, around judging yourself, and releasing those, because that's when you start building trust with your body. And then your emotions. So I'm going to do other workshops on this, but your emotions really are your tickets to healing, because our body absorbs everything we don't process. And so when we are so busy during our days that we don't have time to process everything that's gone on, right? And our body doesn't like recognize the difference, though. I remember reading this after, or learning this after somewhere, of like, if there's a grizzly bear in front of us, or some guy just offended us in a meeting, our body doesn't really know the difference. Our body starts releasing that stress hormone to protect us. And so most of us are not being chased by grizzly bears, but we are having these small things happen throughout our day that kind of, you know, that doesn't feel so comfortable. And so we try to like avoid those. And it's funny because like 99% of the time that I work with clients, when I have them start tuning into their bodies, they just start crying, because there's so much built up there. So whatever releasing emotions works for you, like if it's seeing a therapist or a coach or journaling, or you know, whatever works for you, listening to some music, whatever allows those emotions to come out, that is going to be like one of the most critical things that you can do to help yourself heal through this process. Jen, are there any other techniques that you use with clients to help them release some of the emotional side?
No, we touched on it a lot. I just thought maybe I'd give some examples of, if people aren't sure if these things are like happening to them or not, like what does that look or feel like for you guys? So, you know, we talked about the throat chakra, and if that feels like blocked or you're not expressing yourself, like you can literally have like a physical sensation, like when you go to voice yourself, like your throat might, like this has happened to me before, like your throat feels like constricted, and all of a sudden your voice gets like small, and it feels like it's really hard to talk, like a strain. Or you can literally, like if somebody says something to you, or you're in a situation and you feel just your throat like constrict or getting suffocated because maybe somebody is crossing the boundary, or for you personally, or like impeding on your ability to express yourself even though you're not actually talking. That can be another thing. Is there anything else like throat wise that you would like point out for them to like be paying attention to if they're not aware of like that throat chakra being blocked? Like what what else would happen there, Molly?
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily related to thyroid, but coughing, like someone who has a persistent cough, that's a sure sign that there's something going on with your throat chakra. I can feel a knot in my throat. That's how I feel it.
Or hard to swallow, like a lump.
Sore throat too. Yeah, like anything that can happen there is like an indicator that there's a lack of alignment, between body, mind, spirit. And I have these gorgeous butterflies on here because the thyroid actually looks like a butterfly when you see a picture of it. And our throat chakra is associated with the color turquoise. And the meditation I'll share with you guys at the end is you visualize that turquoise butterfly.
Yeah, and on the energy thing too, like I think the exercise is a big point to make because we've been taught that exercise is the key to health, and in most cases, exercise is an important part of your health. But running yourself into the ground, there is like a point where you can cross the line, a threshold where exercise can become more of a stress. So like Molly gave an example when she was like, in the beginning stages of her disease or her condition, that just it was too much for her. So that's why her doctor told her like you can't exercise in the way that you were. Like you can still be physically active, you just can't exercise in the way that you were. And I see this in clients all the time. A lot of like CrossFitters, runners specifically, Type A personalities, perfectionists, who we've been told you cut calories and you exercise. Well, actually, when we talk about diet in a second, these are the two things that can have a huge detriment to your thyroid overall. So you need to be checking yourself. Like if you are exercising and anywhere from 30 minutes to 2 hours later, you're feeling like a crash, like more fatigue, where you need coffee, you're craving carbs, is like an apnea. That's a sign that the exercise is too much. Also, you can evaluate yourself when you wake up in the morning. If you got a full 8 hours of sleep, you went to bed, at a reasonable bedtime, like 10 o'clock, and you don't feel rested and you did a workout the day before, that can be an indication that your exercise could be too intense. Focusing on restorative exercise like yoga, Pilates, Tai Chi, walking is always beneficial with these kind of conditions that are going on. And so those would be, if you're not sure, like things to kind of gravitate towards also. And I think the breaks thing, like with our work, we live in a society where most of us are salary-based employees, so there is no requirement that we have to take our California state or any state mandated 15-minute break every 2 hours. We live in a society where we work through our lunch. You sit in front of your computer and you eat your lunch while you're still working, and you're never giving your mind or your body a break. So those are little things that I will work with clients on too. Like I have a whole session called stress and metabolism, because stress is impacting the way that you digest food and your thyroid and your adrenal and everything else too. So like one of my clients, her trick is she sits on the opposite side of her desk to eat her lunch so that she's not craving or wanting to work on her computer. Or I have another client who goes into a different break room and she turns around and observes the view of the garden or the park that they have outside. So little things like that, they seem silly and so meaningless, but they actually have a super huge impact. Like Molly was saying, it's again listening to your body. Like when your brain stops working and you can't think through to finish that project that you're working on and you're trying to force it, that's the moment that you need to stop.
Yeah.
You need to walk away, and you either need to come back to it the next day or you come back to it a little bit later. It's like the simplest thing. Like I get up and I get the mail, or I get up and I get a glass of water. I work from home, so I get up and I play with my dog or something for a little bit. Sometimes I do a breathing technique, and those little 5-minute breaks can have a huge impact on your system.
Perfect. Yeah, I agree. My dog's so in tune with me. He stops me from working, and I'm like, okay, it's time for a break. You're right. So one of the biggest things that is an eye-opener for the clients that I work with, and you can process this too, is taking a look at your relationship with your body. And when I ask these 3 questions, which I want you to go through, we're not running out of time, but we don't have a ton of time left, so I'm going to leave you with these questions to process, and you can reach out to us after if you want. I'm curious to see how it goes for you, but I want you to honestly answer, what are the last 5 things that you said to your body? Because when I ask this question to people, I don't think I've ever heard anyone say something nice. or all five things are nice. The next thing I ask is, if someone said those things to you, would you still be friends? So those negative things you're saying to your body, if someone came to you and said those to you, would you still have that person in your life if every day they're saying those things to you? And then the third thing is, if you said those things to a friend, you're so gross, you're so out of shape, whatever it is, right? If you said those things to a friend, would that friend still be around? And the answer is no, usually not. Like, you would not keep that person in your life, and you would not still be friends with them, and they wouldn't be friends with you. So when you start to look at your body as one of the relationships of your life, one of the loves of your life, you start to treat it very differently. You realize that you really haven't done that much for it. For example, I was exercising. Yeah, I heard it was healthy, and that was great. But I was really more exercising to look a certain way and eating to look a certain way. And I wasn't paying attention to the fact that even though that food was labeled healthy by the experts, that my stomach was bloating out to here, which meant it wasn't good for my body. So start paying attention, even, you don't end up working with Jen and I on some level in the future, start paying attention to what is your relationship with your body right now and how can you improve it? How can you start being kinder to it? Because that is how you will, when you rebuild your relationship with your body, you will build trust, and your body will just start healing in ways and faster than you expected and better. And I always say, like, I healed my life by healing my Hashimoto's, because I uncovered so many patterns emotionally, mentally, that were going on underneath the surface to cause these health conditions. And when I released those, I not only healed, but I came out on the other end as a much happier person. And so that's what I want to share with people who are also going through this. So that's my spiel on naturally healthy. And I'm going to turn it over to Jen, who's going to talk about the diet portion of it, which is food is medicine in this journey. You will learn this quickly if you haven't already.
And it goes right along with what we've been talking about building a relationship with your body, taking a look at how your body responds to food. Like I mentioned earlier, my motto is, or what I say to people is, that there's a difference between eating healthy and eating right for your body. Like, eating right for your body is going to include healthy foods, but that does not mean that every healthy food is right for your body. Like Molly was just saying, the example of, you can eat a healthy food and it can still make you feel bloated. And just because the media or this commercial or the box said it was healthy doesn't mean that it's right for you. So one of the key things that I'll work with clients on that is a game changer, and I know a couple of people I think on the line have done this with me maybe before through like my cleanse challenge or something like that, is the foundation is finding the perfect balance of carbs, proteins, and fats for your body specifically. So we're all different in this way. Some of us work better off of, like, our body works better with more fat and proteins, and some of us actually are fueled better with more carbohydrates. Now, the majority is typically a protein diet that consists of a higher intake of fats and proteins. And I mean, if you think about it, for the longest time, how much have we been told that fat is bad for us? And there was the whole low-fat diet craze that happened in like the 2000s and then the 90s and everything. And even now, I mean, I still have people come to me now and they go, "Oh, well, I have like kind of high cholesterol. I shouldn't be eating fat," and that is such like a myth. Like, oh, I love busting that myth because it's so not true. You just need to be eating the right kinds of fats. So it's about finding that perfect ratio. So you can kind of like work on this. Like, one of the key signs that will help you understand this is if you wake up in the morning and you feel the need to eat within about 2 hours of waking up, that usually indicates that you're more of a protein and fat-driven metabolism. So your body metabolizes or breaks down carbohydrates too quickly, so you need fat and protein in your diet to help you stay satiated and balanced, like your blood sugar be balanced. If you're the kind of person who wakes up in the morning and you don't feel hungry, like, you could basically have like maybe a piece of fruit and like a coffee and make it all the way till approximately lunchtime, that's usually an indication that you're more of a carbohydrate metabolizer, where you actually do better with a little bit more carbohydrates in your diet. And when I say carbohydrates, I'm also primarily referring to fruits and vegetables, not like breads and
Yeah.
pastas and kind of grains and things like that. So those are things to kind of pay attention to and look at and play around with your ratios of your food. Specifically for thyroid, adequate protein intake is so critical because you need what's called amino acids to support your T4 levels. So amino acids are the building blocks that are in protein. So when you eat protein, it gets broken down into amino acids, and there's essential and non-essential amino acids. So there's some that your body automatically makes, and then there's others that you have to get from food. So if you're not eating adequate amounts of protein, and beans and legumes don't count as protein, I'm primarily talking about animal proteins. So even if you're a pescatarian or a vegetarian, your best options would be like fish and eggs, and then the most complete plant protein that you can get would be hemp protein, to help supplement that for you. So making sure that you're getting adequate protein to get that done. And then also eliminating the top inflammatory foods. I talk about this a lot, and this is where Molly was mentioning earlier, like not being able to eat the things that other people are eating and feeling deprived as a result of that. I will ask you to look at this differently, because one, I mentioned earlier that gluten can be a trigger for an autoimmune disorder. So if you suspect that you have Hashimoto's hypothyroidism, then you certainly want to look at cutting gluten out of your diet 100%. Dairy, sugar, soy, and alcohol are the other top ones, and then corn and eggs can also be considered inflammatory foods as well. So looking at, I always focus primarily on the gluten, dairy, sugar, soy, and alcohol, because those are processed GMO inflammatory foods, and then you can test yourself with corn and eggs to see how that responds with your body. But you have to have that relationship built with your body in order to like understand that. So when you reduce that inflammation, it reduces the internal stress on your digestive system, your thyroid, your adrenals, your joints, everywhere else. And within a matter of a couple of days of people eliminating these foods, they automatically start feeling better. When they start eating their perfect ratio of proteins, carbs, and fats, their energy goes up, they start feeling better. I know this was a total game changer for Molly too when we did this work together. And this will help you manage your condition better ultimately, or help to put it into remission if you have Hashimoto's. Two other big things that I want to basically like point out here, like the definite don'ts, is the low calorie diets. So this is another fad, like dieting trend, and I still see it. Like people still think that in order to lose weight, they have to reduce their calorie intake and exercise more, and that there's actually no real science or studies that prove that necessarily. And so counting calories doesn't work. And on top of that, when you reduce your calorie intake, you're actually reducing your thyroid function by as much as 38% within a matter of a few days. So that's like 3 days. If you could imagine, if you dieted and restricted your calories, like I hear girls all the time being like, oh, I'm losing weight for my wedding, or I'm losing weight for this, and I'm only taking in 1,200 or 1,500 calories. The reality is that most of you are burning at least 1,800 calories on a regular basis just doing your daily activities. So if you're putting yourself into that calorie deficit all the time, you're impacting your thyroid function hugely, and you don't even know it. And like, I know that we've all been there. I totally was somebody who did this back in the day, and so it impacted my thyroid function. I'm probably lucky that I don't have the gene for it, and I was able to heal my thyroid by rebalancing. Like I eat whatever I want, I just make sure that it's healthy food. I haven't counted a calorie in like 4 years, I think.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is avoiding protein. So I think a tough thing is when I work with people sometimes who are vegetarian or pescatarian, and and we always will talk about like what is the reason for that? Is it like a spiritual thing, a moral value? We talk around that because ultimately, like you might have a tough choice in front of you about what is better for your body. Like do you have to choose between that moral value or maybe that spiritual aspect in order to do what's right for your body, because you're starving your body of the amino acids that it needs for thyroid production. And it's a tough maybe mind shift to make sometimes, and I work with clients who they really can't get over that hurdle, then we just work around it. There's ways to work around it, but ultimately eating protein, and specifically like red meat. A lot of people are fearful of red meat. I love red meat. I eat it 4 times a week at a minimum. And it has all of the nutrients that your body needs for your thyroid and your adrenals, and you just need to be eating organic, grass-fed type of meat to make sure that it doesn't have a negative
Yeah, and if you read a lot of those studies that come out about how horrible meat is for you, you'll see that there's asterisks, like, because it's like overly processed, disgusting meat. If you eat the grass-fed organic stuff, there's not bad stuff in there for you. And I, by the way, I was totally like, no, Jen, because I wanted to be like that spiritual person that didn't eat animal meat, but I was hungry all the time. And I thought I had an eating disorder. And then she told me just to like go order a bacon burger. And I did, and I was like horrified that I was satiated, and I looked down and my stomach was totally flat. Like there was no bloating. I was like, oh my God, I'm so mad this is working right now. But that was what my body wanted. And so I had to let go of all of, again, those beliefs that are running in her head. I had to let go of them because I had to heal my body through eating the right foods, and that included meat and all this other stuff that I hadn't been eating for a long time. So we have like 1 minute left. So if anyone has any questions as I begin to wrap up, just feel free to type in any questions you might have. I will just go through. I don't know why the color's all messed up here, but we're doing a bunch more of webinars coming up that are free. I'm doing one of my own, living with food intolerances. I was determined to like be that fun girl, even though I was on a restricted diet, and not lose my mind. So I developed a lot of tips and tricks to be able to still feel good inside and participate in conversations, even though I couldn't eat or drink anything anyone else was. Then Jen and I are doing why am I in adrenal fatigue and what can I do about it? Again, usually very related to thyroid stuff and gut stuff. Another one is working out on adrenal fatigue. So that's something we talked about. And another thing for me is, are your beauty products hindering your thyroid and adrenal health? So for me, I ended up having to go grain-free, which a lot of people who have autoimmune end up having to do. And I was clueless that there was rice in one of the lotions that I use daily, because it said all natural, everything else. And having an expert talk on that. And then we'll be wrapping up with your gut. So the secret to healing your adrenals is definitely related to your gut. And then using your mind to affect your genes to heal your health. So it ended up there's a gene inside of me that causes autoimmune stuff, but it's no longer the day when we just sit back and go, okay, I inherited this thing. We actually can affect our genes through our thinking and through our emotions. So I'm going to go through that with you guys. And I'm launching a program. We've got more information on it, but if you're interested, you can go on my website and get enrolled in the wait list for it. It's basically helping you through the process of diagnosing, healing, and living your happy ever after. And then here is our contact information for both me and Jen. And finally, the link for you to get your free meditation, for you to connect with your thyroid. So it might feel a little bit out there, but I guarantee if you start doing this, you're going to start feeling better. Jen, anything you want to share before we sign off?
I was just going to say, like, you can go back to the site with your program, because I really want to emphasize this more for the people that are on the line.
Yep.
Because, I work a lot, like I said, on the physical side of things, like doing the testing and working on diet and exercise and stress reduction and sleep and supplementation with people. And I do touch a little bit on what this is, but I cannot express to you guys enough, like, how important it is to work on the mental, emotional, like the mindset part of healing. And that's where a lot of my clients, like, I get them to a certain point and they almost like hit a wall or a plateau, because they need to dive deeper into that aspect. And that's when I'll connect with Molly and we work with clients together on this part of it, because this has been the progression of my own healing as well. So as Molly's worked with me, I've also worked with Molly to heal this part of myself. And I, mentioned earlier that I was amenorrheic for a really long time, and Molly made me meditate for 21 days straight, minutes, and it was absolute torture. I was telling a client about it today. Like, meditation did not come to me at first, but I did it because she told me to do it. And I used to preach it to clients all the time, but I wasn't necessarily practicing it myself. Now I can 100% say that I practice everything that I preach to my clients. And literally on the 22nd day, you guys, I got my period for the first time in like 5 years. And I've had it consistently ever since. And with all of the hormone healing that I had done, the supplements that I had taken, like, that was the one thing that still hadn't like resolved itself. And it wasn't until I started clearing some of the energy and the emotions around it that like everything just started flowing, literally. So I know like it can seem kind of far out there for some of you guys, but we're having this webinar and I'm talking to you about it because it is real. I personally experienced it. So I make sure that you guys get on Molly's list, which you guys should be, I think, from doing the webinar, and check out this program when she rolls it out. Like, I know the clients that I've been working with, like, I'm going to be recommending that they get involved with this because she takes it to another level that I can't take it to. So yeah, I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. That brings tears to my eyes, that story. All right, well, thank you, everyone. And if any of you have questions, you can reach out to Jenna or I directly, depending on what it is. And otherwise, thanks so much for being here. And we're excited to continue sharing some awesome stuff with you over the next couple months. All right.
Awesome, you guys. Have a good evening.
Bye.